Hey guys, it's Woody the Unexceptional Gamer, and this is the latest in my series of Does It Really Work, Does It Really Help? I've done a bunch of these where I covered controllers, special gaming glasses, I've covered headsets, and this one is about displays. I usually kick these things off with a message about any sponsorships I may have, but in this case there's none. All the things I'm going to talk about I just bought online or at the store with regular money, and it's here to help you. I have tried everything from old school CRT televisions to bad HD TVs to good HD TVs to regular monitors to elite gaming PC monitors, and I'm going to share my experiences with you. I'm also going to give you a little bit of a tech education, if you need one, on what the differences are between the high-end stuff and the low-end stuff and how that impacts you when you're gaming. So I'm going to come off camera. You won't see me anymore, but you are going to see some images that demonstrate the difference between good and bad. Let's get this going. So I won't be spending very much time on these old school CRT televisions. I think we've all tried them. For gaming, they actually weren't bad. They had zero input lag, and I'll soon be explaining the difference between input lag, refresh rate, and response time, but we'll leave that for later in the video. These weren't bad, but manufacturers have moved on and customers have moved on, so let's make this video move on too. Alright, now here's your first opportunity to learn from my mistakes. The next thing I bought was this Vizio 50-inch television, and it's an older one. It's not really relevant to the Vizios they make out today. You can check out the specs on your own. But this was the PH50D HDTV 10A, something really close to that, and it was bad for gaming. Even though I bought the thing for gaming, even though I gamed every single day, I bought a television more based on price than on performance, and I paid for it. So just to sidetrack a little bit, I had all my hopes and dreams of this thing helping me play better. I was playing on an old school CRT, not unlike the picture we just looked at, and it was troublesome, and I thought if I had this, I'll be able to spot enemies even when they're just a few pixels. I'll have a bigger screen, I'll have something more clear to see, it'll be fantastic, but it wasn't. And the reason why gets a little technical, but let's get started. The first problem was input lag, and here's what that is. What you're looking at on your screen is a snapshot of two monitors displaying the same thing and getting the input at the same time. On the right, you see it's like 5 seconds, 375, and on the left, it's 5 seconds, 425, 50 milliseconds of a difference. That's a small number, but in a fast shooter, like say Call of Duty being a fast shooter, if you were to try to play that, 50 milliseconds is about a one bullet head start. That's what you're giving everybody that you run into who has a monitor on the right when you're playing on the monitor on the left. People die in about 250 milliseconds. So yeah, 5 bullets for a death, I think that's a good estimate. You're giving them a one bullet head start in Call of Duty when you have a slow display like that. And this frustrated me with the Vizio. It made me crazy. As a matter of fact, the only time in my entire life that I've ever thrown a controller was the first day I got that Vizio, because I had all my hopes and dreams in this thing being better, and it was actually a step backwards, and I was so excited, and I put so much effort and time into getting it and some money, and I won't go on down that road, but yeah. The problem with that Vizio was input lag, and that's something that you need to take into account when you buy a display. Now, a lot of today's TVs have a gaming mode. What makes input lag on TVs such a problem is they do this processing of the image, right? A lot of people might like the edges sharpened a little bit, or they might like, some sort of saturation adjustment to make all the colors sort of pop a little bit more and look happier, or maybe they like it duller, or whatever it is that they like. There are these settings that televisions do to the image that take some time, right? They're kind of, rendering on the fly to some extent, sharpening images, making things pop, etc. And if you're watching a movie, who really cares that you're 50 milliseconds behind? You're good. There's no problem at all. But if you're playing a game, like a fast shooter game, or a rhythm game like Guitar Hero, where you're trying to time stuff with what you see on television, then you've got a big problem there. And you have to sort of, account and adjust for that. So that's what input lag is. It's the amount of time that the monitor is spending thinking about what to display before it actually displays it. Now, specs for input lag are not often shown. For a television, 50 milliseconds isn't really that bad. For a computer monitor, that would be on the very slow side. So target something 50 milliseconds and under for a television, and then probably like a tenth of that, like 10 milliseconds or less for a computer monitor. Because computer monitors don't do the kind of display manipulation that televisions do, which means they're not really ideal for watching movies, but they're pretty good for playing games. We've got more to talk about. Next up is response time. And this is the amount of time that it takes for an individual pixel, like a little crystalline, to flip in an LCD monitor. It's usually measured in gray to gray. And for a computer monitor, you might target something under 5 milliseconds. You can also get them under 2 milliseconds. And for a TV, then, you might want something under 5 or 10. The televisions tend to be slower. Bigger televisions tend to be slower than smaller televisions. That's just rules of thumb that you can look at. The difference, the impact that this has, is it creates kind of a blur. So response time is basically the measure that it takes for a pixel to change from one color to the next. And that's huge in a game because, like in a movie, things don't move that fast, but in a game they do. And it wasn't so much like you might guess, characters moving in front of you that was my big problem. It was me moving. When I moved, the entire world moved. When I spun in my character, I would be temporarily blind. And then when I stopped moving, I'd have to sort of re-get my bearings. Just how far did I spin and who's out there and what do I need to see? That was the impact that having a bad response time had on me. The whole world was a blur during fast movement, and then it sharpened up when I sort of stopped and looked again. If you look at this guy skiing, it kind of demonstrates it. There's two things going on here. One, look at the snow just, to the top right of his feet. The whole thing is a blur. Whereas on the left, there's crisp snow that you can make out. What's going on there? Well, the pixels are changing from white to blue back to white again in a hurry, or white to another shade of white or whatever. And then more obviously, look at the trail that's behind the guy, right? What's happening there is this guy's moving quickly across the screen, but it's not turning back to blue in a hurry. That's what happens in this ski scene. And like I said, in a shooter, what would happen is when you twist your body, right? In the shooter, this is. So your whole perspective of the world shifts. You get this sort of motion blindness, and you can't see while you're moving at the same time. Running forward's fine, but moving side to side or strafing, it blinds you. And that's the problem with having a bad response time in the gaming world. For a PC monitor, you might expect... for a television, you might expect something like 10 milliseconds or less if it has a gaming mode. For a PC monitor, it used to be 5 milliseconds was the rule of thumb. Now that's down to like 2 because these PC monitors have gotten really fast and people understand that a lot of PCs play games. Also, they're smaller. So, Anyway, look for something 0.5 to 0.2-ish on a PC display and, 0.5 to 0.1-ish on a television display. Also, for a TV, look for something that has a game mode because that's going to do a whole lot less processing of the image like we talked about before. So, keeping on with my own personal history, I went from that Vizio to a Panasonic Plasma. I did a lot of research, and found out what the best one was at the time. And for gaming, it was the Panasonic Plasma. Now, they say don't drive angry. In my case, they should warn me not to shop angry because I was just so furious and unhappy, and gaming meant a lot to me. So I went out and bought the best Panasonic Plasma out there. It turns out, in retrospect, I probably wouldn't have bought some of the internet connectivity features. I never use my television's built-in wireless or cable to check the weather or whatever. I could have just got the same display performance in a less expensive display, but still, be good for gaming. And that was okay, but some of the problems I had with it is I think it was 52 inches. And that's a lot. Let's say that the enemy's coming from one side and you're looking down one alley, but you also need to keep an eye on that window in the top corner of the screen. I kind of couldn't watch two places at once on a television that size. And then, of course, it's not quite as responsive as a PC monitor, but it was responsive enough for first-person shooters. I just didn't like the big size of it, and I was kind of ready to get out of the living room so that I could game without bothering the rest of the family. And that's when I went to my first PC display. The Acer H243H. So I did a lot of research before buying this too. I tend to do that. And I sort of narrowed it down to maybe 2 or 3 monitors. And then I just bought the first one that I could get that was on sale and stuff like that. And it's good. I gamed on this thing for years. It has a 60 hertz refresh rate. And that's what we're going to talk about next when you get into the world of PC monitors. In terms of response time, it was really quick, and I'm quite happy with it. And in terms of input lag, there's none that I know of or that I can detect. It's fast and it's speedy and it's great. As a note, by the way, Sandy Ravage games on this same monitor. And fun fact, Sandy's broke on him. I don't know how. It somehow wore out. Maybe he had a manufacturer issue or something. But mine keep going, and these things are on all the time. And also, I once dropped a bunk bed on both of them. Like they still have like paint marks, like scars on the bezel, but the monitors just keep on going like the day they were new. So I'm really happy with mine. I think Sandy Ravage replaced his with the same thing, but I'm not positive because I know he was really happy with his until he ran into that trouble with it breaking, which is pretty significant problem. But in PC monitors, there's another thing to start looking at, and TVs too, and that's the refresh rate. The refresh rate is how many times per second the image refreshes, right? So you can imagine how this plays a role too. For console gamers, the limit there is 60. Nothing happens faster than 60 frames per second. For regular television and movies, you're watching at 24 frames per second. So a monitor that handles 60 refreshes per second is doing great. You know, anything more would be a waste. If the thing refreshes 120 or 240 times per second, then, you know, your television playing at 24 isn't really going to benefit, or your game playing at 60 isn't going to benefit either. But in the PC world, sometimes, you know, if you play a game on low settings or if you have a really great graphics card, you can start playing at more than 60 frames per second. And that's why I bought this thing, the BenQ monitor. Mine is the 2420T, and while you can argue about what the best gaming monitor in the world is, this is going to be on somebody's list, right? It is, you know, in the conversation of top-end gaming monitor. And I like that I have it because it gives me the experience to talk about everything from this to, you know, the lowest of the low in the television world. Anyway, I have a good graphic card. It's the 7970, which as I write this is the, you know, quickest thing out there by AMD. And it'll often play games at over 60 frames per second. And the question is, can you tell? There are arguments out there about whether or not most people can see above 60 frames per second or not. You know, that some people say, look, beyond 60, it's a waste. And what is generally agreed upon is 60 is good. Most people will tell you that if you're getting 60 frames per second, that's kind of the magic number on whether or not your system is performing like you expect it to. So there it is. 60 is kind of a guideline. But if your graphics card's doing 90, why not have a monitor that's going to, you know, refresh a little quicker and give you those 90 frames per second that your graphics card is capable of giving you? You want my opinion, and some, you know, science has backed this up, although I didn't perform it, on whether or not you can tell? The difference is subtle. So picture this in your head. Imagine you're looking at a pure white screen, right? It's just white, it's kind of bright to look at, etc. And you're going to have one frame of blackness. For something like that, you can spot it at 60 frames per second, but probably not at 120 frames per second. If you have white and then a black flashes really fast at 120 frames per second, there's a chance you'll miss it. On the other hand, if you're looking at a black screen and it's just black, and then somewhere while you're looking at it, it pops white for 120th of a second, all of you will see it. So the question of whether or not gaming benefits from going to, say, 120 frames per second, you know, it's subtle. It's like some scenes are going to benefit from it. Other scenes are not going to benefit from it. Some, you know, if it's just a bunch of guys moving in the desert, then maybe you can't tell the difference. But if it's a Team Fortress 2 environment, then maybe your eye does spot all that contrast that happens at higher frames per second. That's my opinion on it. You guys can debate and berate in the comments. But, yeah, if you're looking at white and it pops black, you can't tell quite as easily. It just seems shiny. If you're looking at black and it pops white at you, then the thing jumps out and you see it obviously. So there it is. For me, and I'm not an elite Twitch PC gamer, although perhaps I aspire to be, I really couldn't tell the difference over 60 frames per second in a game setting. Now, I talked to Incredible Orb. If you don't know Incredible Orb, he is an elite PC gamer. He did Counter-Strike for ages. He's doing a lot of Call of Duty lately. And he was telling me, you have to get 120 frames per second. If you don't, I'm going to own you, every time we get into a gunfight. And turns out he still would. But, for him, the difference was really important. And for me, I hope to get to the level where the difference is really important for me. So there it is. That's the best education I can give you guys on displays. If I was to sum all this thing up into a too long didn't watch, here it is. You want a low input lag. Input lag isn't often advertised as a spec on displays, but you need it to be hopefully under 10 milliseconds for a TV and 5 for a monitor. And input lag is how long it takes for the image, for your TV to think about the image and get it on the screen. You want a low response rate, and the response is how quickly a pixel shifts from one color to the other. And then you want a high refresh rate. A refresh rate is how many times per second or how many frames per second the monitor is capable of displaying. All right, if you learned something or enjoyed the video, be sure to click on like. I always appreciate it when you do. On the right is Wife Wednesday. It was really good this week. We had a good time. We talked about me living in an environment with brief nudity and sexual content. It was a blast. On the left is the playlist for more videos like the one you just watched. I've done controllers, which is the thumbnail you see, but I've done glasses, gaming glasses. I've done headsets. I've done all sorts of stuff, and you can check those out if videos like this one interest you. And have a good day.